This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and very pleased to have with us on the line Karen Hobert-Flynn, who is the president of Common Cause, commoncause.org. Of course, the website. You can tweet Karen at Common Cause or at khobertflynn, HOBERTFLYNN. Karen, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Or I should say, President Hobert-Flynn. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So tell us about we're seeing all these assaults against our right to vote, and of course this is nothing new. It goes back to the founding of this country. The disenfranchisement of people who had, shall we say, different interests than the power structure at the time. Where are we at right now with the ability of Americans to vote? Where are the Republicans trying to take us, and what's Common Cause doing about it?
You know, there are lots of challenges that voters are facing right now, and one of the most recent is, people have heard President Trump talk about the fact that there were millions of illegal votes cast in the 2016 election. And by the way, according to him, he also said all of those illegal votes went to Hillary Clinton, which is just a ridiculous statement. But he uses that as a pretext to call together a commission, the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity, or known as the Pence-Kobach Commission, to be looking at so-called in-person voter fraud. And one of the things that they've done is put in place Chris Kobach, who is Secretary of State in Kansas, and he's somebody who has been known to put in place practices that suppress the vote, and he sent a letter to election officers across the country asking for voter information, names of voters, addresses, private information, including their voter affiliation, their vote history, and other related details. And so Common Cause has filed a lawsuit, and our lawsuit is to protect voters under the Privacy Act, because we believe that every eligible American has a right to an equal voice and a vote in their future, their family and their community and their country. And the Privacy Act was passed in the wake of Watergate, when Nixon's White House compiled information on individuals with opposing political views. In fact, our own founder, John Gardner, who was a Republican under Lyndon Johnson's administration, he served as Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, was actually on Nixon's enemies list.
Whoa.
And so we are concerned about the privacy issues and what that means for voters.
Yeah. And so what is your lawsuit asking for? What specifically are you suing to accomplish?
So we are asking that they cease and desist in asking and collecting and maintaining this voter database. We are asking that any data that they have collected, that they return to states, and also deal with any costs and reasonable attorney's fees. I mean, the challenge here is we are hearing reports of voters who are afraid that Trump and his administration will get hold of this data, and so they are eliminating their voter registration. And we do not want Americans to be afraid to vote, and we think that there are real challenges with what this commission is looking at. In many ways, there are many problems with this commission. First, this notion of looking at in-person voting fraud. There are studies after studies that have shown that there are very few instances of in-person voter fraud. Second, what they're doing to gather this list reminds us of the cross-check program that Chris Kobach has put into place. He has put in a cross-check program that looks at databases to try and find double registration. So Kobach alleges that there are people that are registered and vote in multiple states. And one of the things we found as you look at what the cross-check program has done, as it has eliminated thousands and thousands of voter registrants for no reason. In fact, one tally found that the program flagged 7.2 million possible double registrants, but found no more than 4 have actually been charged with deliberate double registration or double voting. It just doesn't happen. And courts have shown the same thing. We have had courts strike down some of these voter purges in states. And so the commission isn't even looking at the right things because we have so little in-person voter fraud. What they should be looking at are the vote suppression measures and the voter purges that happen as a result of this cross-check program.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only has there been study after study, but correct me if I'm wrong, George W. Bush demanded that his federal prosecutors go after so-called voter fraud. They spent, as I recall, $74 million over a 6-year period looking for this. 7 of the federal prosecutors refused to do it. They said it was a waste of time. He fired them. Am I remembering that correctly? And they found like 30 cases of voter fraud over a 10-year period, and more than half of them were people, filling out ballots for their spouse who had dementia or for their parents or something like that.
No, that's exactly right. And so we've seen government investigation of this, academic research, others looking at this and find there's no there. There isn't that much incentive to do it. First of all, it's a felony. There are penalties that you pay. And if you were to vote twice, that rarely changes an election. So where's the incentive in doing that? What they should be looking at is the vote suppression measures that we've seen show up in states. And for example, Chris Kobach himself has authored and promoted a proof of citizenship voting measure, which has been struck down by federal courts as impermissibly unconstitutional and targets voters, black voters, Hispanic voters, and those that tend to be in poorer communities. And
Asian American voters because of common names.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because of common names.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the legislation? Congressman Mark Pocan is a regular. Every week he comes on this program and takes calls from our listeners for an hour. And he dropped legislation. He's the co-chair of the Progressive Congressional Caucus. And he dropped legislation last week that would basically make illegal what Chris Kobach is up to. Are you familiar with that?
We have seen that, and it's a terrific measure and one that we support. The challenge, I think, is whether that can move through this Congress with Republican control.
Oh, clearly it won't, but it's a start.
Right. It's a very important start. And, we also have we've seen some of these lawsuits coming into play around this Pence-Kobach commission and the kind of data that they're trying to pull together. Our filing is the only suit that, if successful, would permanently stop the collection of this data, which I think is very important. The other challenge is also just the makeup of this commission. This is not like the Presidential Commission for Election Administration that we saw put together by the Obama administration that actually had co-chairs. It was Mitt Romney's legal counsel and Obama's legal counsel, and they pulled together a commission that looked at the challenges around voter suppression and came out with a bipartisan commission that recommended more than a dozen different kinds of reforms that would help make voting more accessible, more convenient, things like online voter registration, ensuring that people don't have to be in long lines, longer than 30 minutes. Right. And it was a very successful commission, one that involved data and people who know what they're talking about, rather than noted vote suppressors like Chris Kobach and Pence.
Yeah, and we need to look back at that. Finally, we're talking with Karen Hobert-Flynn, the president of Common Cause, commoncause.org. over the many years of my life, I've encountered a number of people who proudly have not registered to vote, or maybe proudly is the wrong word, but will tell you that they are not registered to vote. And to the best of my recollection, without exception, 100% of them have said to me that the reason that they're not registered to vote is because they're working people who can't afford to take a few days even, and particularly a week or two, off their work without possibly losing their job or wiping out their income. And when they register to vote, they're automatically put on the jury rolls, and they don't want to take that risk. Is there any chance of delinking those things?
That's an interesting question. To me, I think that it's very important that people do that service in their community to serve on a jury. But if they are working in a place where they can't afford to take that time off, you can appeal to the courts so that you don't have to do that. Right. You can also say this is a really busy time and I can't do it at this time and defer it for later. But that isn't, it's not something I heard a lot about, but it would be worth doing some polling to see if that is one reason why people don't register.
I think I can tell you just from personal experience. I literally know probably a half a dozen people, in the last 10 years who have made that comment to me.
It's interesting. What we hear is that it's so difficult to register. A lot of people don't even think about registering to vote until Election Day, and then because only a few states have same-day voter registration where you can show up at the polls, register, and then vote, people find that they had to register 21 days or a month before in order to vote. So in a lot of ways, I think that our voting is not convenient. We should have early voting days so people have multiple chances to go so that they're not stuck in long lines. Frankly, we also advocate that Election Day should be a holiday.
Okay.
So
Karen, we're hitting a break here